Hey everybody, welcome to episode 5. And here in episode 5, we're going to really get our testing done and make sure that we've got everything well. I did do a test off camera, just a general test, and I'll do it again on camera so you could see it. But essentially, what I found is something I think that our friend Doug Muslak mentioned, is the inrush of current is actually blowing the 0.5 amp fuse on the center tap of the high power side. And that's something that I kind of knew would happen, and Brendan knew would happen, but that's why we're testing. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a pair of 200 ohm 20 watt resistors between this wire and the diodes that go in this power supply section. And you'll see I have a terminal strip here already mounted to do that. So we're going to add those in. And then we're going to put a meter on the high power side, the B+, and on the filament voltage, and we're going to see what happens. And we're going to put tubes in it, and then we'll see where we are. So I'm going to go install this pair of resistors right here, and when that's done, we'll come back and we'll do our testing. Be back. Okay, we have our 200 ohm resistors in, and now we're going to connect all of our test leads. We're going to stand this thing up, and we're going to do an initial power up. All right, let's get that going. Okay. We have this meter right here connected to our B+ rail, and I'm going to expect this voltage to be somewhere around 400 plus or minus a little bit here. And I have this one connected to my filament string. Now I don't have any tubes in the radio at this point. I mean the radio in the amp at this point. I've taken all the tubes out. It's a 6.3 volt AC winding, and we'll see what we get DC as it goes through the bridge. So I've got my variac all the way down to 0. We've got our power switch on, and we're going to turn the variac on right there, and we're going to go up slowly and see what happens. Okay, we are at 20 volts, and you'll see at 20 volts I'm already at 52 volts DC on the B+. That's good. Our filament voltage isn't very high. Let's go up to 40. We're up to 40 volts. I'm already showing 120 DC on the B+, and about 2.1. You'll see our indicator light starting to glow. Let's give that a second to bake. Let's go to 60. There's 60. And we are up to just under 200 volts B+. That's about halfway there. So as our estimate of 400 is probably about right. And there's our 3.9 filament string. Let's go up to 80. There's 80. And 80 brings us up to 275 and 5.6. Let's go to 100. There's 100. And we're looking at 7 volts plus 7.1 on the filament string, and about 340 on the B+. And finally, let's go up to 120. There's 120. Looks like we're settling into about 408 volts B+, around there, 409. And about 8.7 volts on the filament string. That's with no tubes. Okay, I'm going to turn the power off, and I want to see how fast this thing drains. I have a 500K resistor in the power supply, as you recall, and I can show you that right here before we do it. You'll see right here is a 500K 1 watt resistor. Let's see how fast this thing bleeds down. Turn the power off. Power is off. Yeah, it's going to take a while. So here's an important thing for those of you that are learning and haven't done much of these. You can't go sticking your hands in there right now. You still have 300 volts in there. Right? And this is going to take a while to drain down. Or what I can do is I can put a resistor between this cap right here and ground, and just drain it out quickly. And you'll see that our filament voltage is also going very slow. Now, in order to drain that, I could just put a tube in. That should drain that quickly. So let me shut this off. I'm going to put the tubes in and we're going to run the same test. Be right back. Okay, I put my tubes in. I'm going to bring my variac down to 0 again. You'll see that we still have plenty of B+ voltage here. We're going to turn the power back on. And we're going to slowly bring this up. We're going to bring it up to 40 to start with. Helps when you plug it in. Okay, we're going to go to 40. I see my indicator light is glowing slowly. The B+ is still up there, so you're not going to see anything going up. Let's go to 60. I think if I hit about 100 volts, you'll start to see the B+ start to climb. You'll notice my filament voltage is only 1.6, and that's at 60 volts. Let's go up to 100. Okay, at 100 you're seeing the B+ start to climb, and you're seeing our filament at 3.6. Let's go all the way to 120. Okay, at 120, looks like I'm creeping back up to the 408 or so that I was at. And you'll see my filament voltage is at 4.8. And that's with a load, okay? And I don't know if you can see this, but looking at my tubes, I do have filament glow on all 3 tubes. So my filaments are glowing. So the thing to think about here is I have 6.3 volts AC going into the bridge rectifier, and I have 8 volts coming out. Under load, I have about 4.8. Right? We know that there's a 0.7 volt voltage drop across a diode. So theoretically, I'm going down about 1.4 volts. So the real way to test that, obviously, is I can put a scope on there, and we can observe the difference. But we know that our filaments are working and our B+ is working at this point, right? It's a good clean power supply. The only thing I haven't tested is draining down this whole thing and turning it on cold and see what happens. And that was what was happening before I put those resistors in. I was popping the fuse. So we're going to drain this thing down. Let's power it off. Okay. I have a resistor right here, right there, and we're going to take one end of this resistor, we're going to put it on the ground, on the chassis, being really careful, and we're going to connect the other end to our B+, and you're going to hear a little spark, and you'll notice that our B+ is now safe, it's down. Okay, I'm going to remove that resistor, and you'll see it'll start to climb. I'm going to set the variac to about 110. And we're going to crank this thing up and see what happens. Ready? Go. Excellent. Looks like it survived the inrush just fine. So those 200 ohm resistors on the high power side do the trick of preventing that inflow and blowing that fuse. So we have ourselves here a good power supply. I do want to throw the my oscilloscope on the filament voltage side and take a look and make sure it's nice and clean. And I want to do that because I know I have a 200 microfarad 25 volt cap on my filament voltage. And I want to make sure that that's sufficient. I want to make sure that there's no no dip here. So I'm going to turn this off, drain the filter cap again, get the oscilloscope going, and then we'll show you that. So I'll be right back. Okay, I have my oscilloscope set to the filament, and I'm not happy with what I see here. So you'll see that my my DC sine wave isn't clean. What you're seeing is, it rises up and then it steadily drops down. It's not normal. So that tells me that that cap has to be a little bit bigger on the filament voltage. To me, that doesn't look clean. I'm going to have to consult with Brendan on that one and just make sure. But I'm thinking that I probably need something a little bit more beefy on that filament circuit. So let's just make sure that I've got this right. I'm just going to do an auto set, and it looks like my peak to peak is 6 volts. Yep. If I change the time, yeah, that's not clean. That should be a clean sine wave. So I'm going to have to experiment a little bit with caps there, which is fine. I have plenty of caps. So what I'll do is I'll remove that cap and we'll put another one in of a value that we think is better. I'm going to go higher, not lower. So let me go do that. We'll be back. Okay, I installed a 470 microfarad cap, 100 volt. It's better. It's not perfect, but it's better. So instead of me guessing what I want to do here, I'm going to have to figure out the calculation, how to do this, and get the right voltage, get the right value capacitor in there. So it did make a difference, but it's not fully improved. So let me go back to the drawing board on that, and I'll let you know what I find. Be back. Okay, in order to help smooth out our filament voltage, we're going to replace this 470 microfarad cap with a 1000 microfarad cap. That's probably going to be what we're able to do here. In talking to Brendan, I've learned that it's never really going to be completely smooth. It's DC voltage, it's for filaments. This should be just fine. So we're going to remove that, replace it with this, and then we'll come back and test it on the scope again. Okay, we're about to fire her up and we'll see what it looks like. Let's go. Okay, here we are. It's better. It's not perfect. The top is very flat, but that's okay. This is only a filament voltage we're talking about here. So we're going to call the filament voltage good and done. So that's complete. So the next thing we're going to do now is we're going to build our B1 and our B2. So we have B+, which I showed you. Now we're going to focus on the B+1 and the B+2, which are which is the voltages that go to the 12AX7s. So let's work on that. Okay, everybody, we're back, and we've made a slight modification to our project and a decision. So if you recall, our original product was going to be 2 12AX7 tubes. One was going to be our preamp, and one was going to be for our vibrato. And I thought about this and talked to Brendan about it. This is a bass amp, and I really don't need to worry about vibrato for this particular project. So I'm going to cut this entire tube out of the equation, basically. Essentially, this is what it looks like, right? So we're going to just have a straight 12AX7 here with our treble controls and bass and volume. We're still going to create a separate B+2 rail for this 12AX7, simply because this 6550 tube requires a certain amount of voltage, so we have to keep it there. So we're going to separate the B+ rail, continue to do that. But we're going to make this amp much easier. Now, one of the other reasons why I decided to do this is the real estate. Looking in this chassis, right, there's not a lot of room in here. It's a small chassis. The cabinet itself is really small. So by removing, like this tube here, that will give me a much wider area to build out the rest of the amp. So we're going to go ahead and make that modification. So now I'm going to continue and build out the B+2 rail, which comes off of this B+ rail right here. And then we'll be able to start wiring up the tubes. First order of business is going to be putting in the pots, volume, tone, treble and bass, and getting that going. And I think what we'll do is we'll save that for the next episode. So in this episode here, we've got our power supply exactly where it needs to be. Everything works fine. Our voltages look good. Our DC filament voltages look good. We saw that on the scope. And we're going to call this one a wrap. And we will see you in episode 6, where I will show you some of the progress I'm making on the wiring of the actual amp. This should really be a piece of cake here. There's not a lot. It's really not a lot in here. You gotta remember, a 12AX7 is really 2 tubes, right, in one. All right. So this whole section is really just 1 tube. So it looks like it's busy, but it's really not. It's very simple. So this would be pretty easy to do. I am gonna. I did make a modification here after talking to Brendan about putting in a variable feedback control. And the reason why you want to do that is it alters the sound that you get out of the amp. So we're going to put that in. It's really just a 50K pot that sits right here off of the speaker jack with a 1K resistor. and I should be able to modify the sound. And we're going to do a little bit of experimenting, but that'll be fine. All right. So you guys have a good rest of your Sunday, and we'll see you during the week as we're making progress. Take care.